No end in sight to dispute over northeast New Territories redevelopment. Deadly clashes rock Egypt. And 2 Latin American countries offer asylum to Edward Snowden.
Good evening. The Development Secretary is insisting that the government isn't bowing to pressure from property developers. Paul Chan's comments came as concern groups that are against revised plans to redevelop the northeast New Territories continue to lobby for a golf course in the area to be used to build homes. Most of the complaints about the renewed plan to develop the northeast New Territories surround the role of private developers. Speaking to TVB News, the Secretary for Development insisted there's enough check and balance within the government to safeguard public interest.
Well, we laid down very clearly the criteria for in situ land exchange. We published the zoning. We also made public the timetable as well as the compensations. So these are very transparent. And inside the government to examine this in situ land exchange, this is a cost department effort.
The in situ land exchange system allows developers holding land zoned for private residential purposes to go ahead with the development. A system, Chan pointed out, was used in the development of many other new towns in Hong Kong. Property developers had threatened to file a judicial review against the previous plan that excluded private sector involvement, but Chan insisted the decision to collaborate now isn't a sign of the government bowing to pressure. There are those who disagree.
Currently, the discussion of the premium between the government and the developer is in a private basis. If the government really want to make it transparent, it is necessary to make it a public basis.
Thames Group has put forward a plan that would use the 170 hectares of government land that's currently leased at a nominal annual rent to the Fanling Golf Course. His calculations showed that using the golf course could be an option that would result in the earlier completion of flats. The group rejected the development chief's claims that the golf club can't replace village land for the current development because it would take too long. Chan said yesterday the golf course may be included in future plans to redevelop the northeast New Territories. Then there's the issue of compensation. More than 1,000 villagers will be forced to leave their homes when the government begins redeveloping the northeast New Territories. Now, with multiple households living under the same roof, there's confusion on how landlords and tenants would share the money. Andrew Lau has that story.
Mr. Chan has been living in his squatter hut in Tin Ping Shan village in Shengshui for more than 2 decades. 10 years ago, he and his wife began subdividing flats and installing extra structures in their backyard. It costs about $1,000 to rent each of these 100-square-foot units. One of the tenants, Mr. Deng, has been living here for about 6 years. I'm not sure how the government will compensate me, but they must give me somewhere to live. I don't want to be homeless, he said. According to the government's compensation scheme, households living in squatter huts for up to 10 years could apply for a $600,000 subsidy. Secretary for Development Paul Chan said if there's more than one household in the squatter hut, residents will have to decide among themselves how to share the money. Mr. and Mrs. Chan believe they are qualified for the subsidy, but are not sure whether their tenants are. They're also unsure whether to split the sum with their tenants. Inside the village, we also found new homes under construction. The Residents Association is worried that people may claim the subsidy even though they're not entitled to it. Chen said if the residents run into any problems, they should contact relevant authorities immediately. He also stressed that unqualified residents will not receive any subsidy. We'll check with the applicants as to how long they've stayed there to make sure nobody is cheating the government. Andrew Lau, TVB News.
Turning overseas now, at least 30 people were killed and 1,000 injured in violence in Egypt yesterday as Islamists opposed to Wednesday's overthrow of President Mohamed Morsi took to the streets. They vented their rage over what they say was an illegal military coup. Alan Buckner reports.
Tens of thousands of people marched across Cairo in what Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood movement called a Friday of Rage. Soldiers used water cannon and tear gas to hold back the protesters. There were reports that several people were killed by army gunfire, but that's being denied by the military. Meanwhile, just as many demonstrators amassed in Cairo's Tahrir Square, celebrating Morsi's ouster. Fierce clashes in the Mediterranean coastal city of Alexandria left at least 12 people dead and more than 200 injured. Many major world powers, including the United States, have been careful not to call Morsi's overthrow a coup, because that would involve sanctions against a perceived ally. But U.S. Senator John McCain questioned whether Washington should continue to give Egypt $1.5 billion in annual aid, given the situation.
We have to suspend aid to the Egyptian military because the Egyptian military has overturned the vote of the people of Egypt. And we cannot set a precedent, which frankly let me put it this way, we cannot repeat the same mistakes that we made at other times in our history by supporting the removal of freely elected governments.
But Egypt's ambassador to the U.S. defended Morsi's removal, saying millions of Egyptians were demonstrating simply for early elections.
Now, President Morsi and his supporters, what they did is they mobilized, they stirred people's feelings up, and basically they encouraged their supporters to face the other demonstrators. So there was no option for the military.
Meanwhile, the Egyptian military has given scarce details on a time frame for new elections, adding to the political uncertainty. Alan Buckney, TVB News.
The presidents of both Nicaragua and Venezuela say their countries are willing to offer asylum to U.S. whistleblowing fugitive Edward Snowden. The offer is a possible lifeline to the man who's been stuck in limbo in the transit area of a Moscow airport for the past few weeks.
Edward Snowden, whose leaks to the media helped expose the extent of U.S. government spying activity, could now end up in Latin America, with Venezuela and Nicaragua expressing a willingness to take him in. Evoking rhetoric out of the ideological playbook of his late predecessor Hugo Chavez, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro offered Snowden sanctuary from the persecution of empire, referring to the United States. Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega made a similar pledge, saying his government would seriously consider an asylum request from Snowden. After fleeing Hong Kong last month, the former National Security Agency contractor has been holed up in a Moscow airport transit lounge, asking various countries for asylum from US efforts to bring him to justice. Some of them have already turned him down. But this week's debacle over the diversion of Bolivian President Evo Morales' plane in Europe may have nudged the situation more in Snowden's favour. Latin American leaders are furious that a presidential flight was treated so shabbily over the unfounded assumption that Snowden was secretly on board. They've interpreted it as Europe bowing to pressure from Washington. So unsurprisingly, Venezuela and Nicaragua, which have had uneasy relations with the US in the past, have seized on this chance to thumb their nose once more at America. But it also gives the sense that Snowden is once again being used as a pawn to score points against the US and make those using him look strong against the might of Washington. Whether countries like Venezuela or Nicaragua actually take him in, or organizations like WikiLeaks can really help him, is still up in the air.
Delegates from North and South Korea have begun talks on restarting a stalled joint factory park on the border between the two countries. The Kaesong Industrial Park was closed in April as tensions rose between the rivals when South Korea held military exercises with the US troops near the border. The North ordered its workers to leave the park, while South Korean managers brought in to run the place also left. The two agreed to discuss retrieving products that the South Korean managers left behind at the complex, as well as inspecting the facilities. They'll also discuss restarting work at the park.
The World Health Organization is forming an emergency committee to prepare for the possible worsening of the Middle East coronavirus, or MERS, as it's known in its shortened form. The virus has already claimed the lives of more than 40 people, and the health department here in Hong Kong says it's monitoring the latest 2 cases reported to the WHO by Saudi Arabia. The global health body explained why it was taking this step.
We really want to be in a position to be ready for any possibility, and we want countries to be in a position of being ready for any possible directions that this virus could take.
And still to come in the news. Landfill expansion plans hit another snag. Worsening dispute between the government and cleaning contractors. And a mouth-watering Wimbledon men's final to look forward to.
And welcome back. There's fresh opposition to government plans to expand the Tuen Mun and Ta Kwu Ling landfills. Lawmaker and rural leader Lau Wong Fat is now against plans to extend the Tuen Mun site. Rani Samtani has more.
The LegCo Public Works Committee has already given the green light to plans to expand the Tuen Mun and Ta Kwu Ling landfills. However, opposition remains. Rural leader Lau Wong Fat, a member of the Business and Professionals Alliance in LegCo, has made clear he's against the expansion of the Tuen Mun site. Lau had previously agreed to approve the expansion of the landfills, but has now changed his mind. The Business and Professionals Alliance has 7 members in LegCo. Lau has threatened to leave the group if others refuse to vote against the proposals. He said it is his duty to protect the residents there. The LegCo Finance Committee will discuss the funding request on Friday. It has 68 members, not counting its chairman, and 35 votes are required to approve the projects. Secretary for the Environment Wong Kam Sing stated that plans to expand the Tuen Mun landfill are not finalized. The money will be used to expand the Ta Kwu Ling landfill and go towards consultation on the feasibility of expansion for the Tuen Mun site. Wong also expressed fears over plans by legislators to filibuster the funding application to delay expansion plans. He hopes they will rethink their position. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
The Executive Council convener pointed out today that there is an urgent need for Hong Kong to implement political reform. Lam Mun Kwong said the proportional representation electoral system has to be scrapped because it hinders the development of Hong Kong. Evelyn Leung reports.
The government has not been able to win lawmakers' support in its plans to expand Hong Kong's 3 landfills. Just one example of the administration's failure to push ahead with policies and its difficult relations with the legislature. Executive Council convener Lam Mun Kwong said today this is a result of Hong Kong's outdated constitutional framework. He said the proportional representation system used in LegCo elections allows smaller and radical political parties to win seats by appealing to just a small number of voters. This has made it hard for the government to pass legislation because making compromises with the administration is frowned upon in the council, Lam said. He warned that the situation is only going to get worse, even when universal suffrage is implemented in the 2017 chief executive election. To resolve this, there has to be a constitutional reform.
People do not like deadlock situation. And I think overall, our voters, like most voters in the rest of the world, tend to be mild and tend to be at the center of the political spectrum. So we'll have to put faith back to our Hong Kong people and hope that they will be able in time to change the behavior of our politicians and our political parties.
The Executive Council convener hopes that when the government introduces political reforms, different parties will take a step back and will be willing to make compromises. Evelyn Lang, TVB News.
Secretary for Labour and Welfare Matthew Cheung says the government will not top up pay for contractors because of a $2 rise in the minimum wage. Contractors have pleaded for help, citing fears of going out of business if they're forced to shoulder the burden alone. But as Vicky Kong reports, Cheung's not budging.
A protest by cleaners earlier this week highlighted the dispute between the government and cleaning contractors. Officials have refused to subsidize the contractors following a $2 increase in the minimum wage this year to $30. The government did compensate them back in 2011 when Hong Kong implemented its first minimum wage at $28 an hour. Today, Secretary for Labour and Welfare Matthew Cheung made clear the contractors have to bear the $2 increase because it is considered moderate.
The rationale for topping up the allowances initially is because of the wide differential between the minimum wage as a starting point, $28 an hour, vis-a-vis the prevailing wage at that particular time, because there was a pretty huge gap. But these $30 increase this time is only $2 increase and considered to be generally modest.
Cheung also said longer-term contracts have a built-in clause to keep up with inflation, making it unnecessary for top-ups. But Catherine Yan, who represents the city's cleaning contractors, says that's not always the case.
Well, in fact, there's various government departments, they tender out their service and with different contract terms. Not everyone have CPI or inflation adjustment. For example, those contracts we are chasing for is a fixed rate for the whole contract term, and there's no adjustment at all.
Though $2 isn't much, the Alliance says that the increase can add up to an extra $90 million for a contractor to cough up, an expenditure that it fears will end up closing down some businesses. Vicky Kong, TVB News.
Turning overseas again, analysts say a move by Pope Francis to clear two of the most influential pontiffs in recent times to become saints shows his willingness to bend church tradition when it comes to things he cares deeply about. Pope John Paul II, seen as a conservative, and Pope John the 23rd, who's associated with reform, have both been honoured. NBC News has the story.
During more than a quarter century as Pope, John Paul II traveled the world, making history, inspiring millions, and earning their affection. At his funeral in 2005, mourners called out, "Santo Subito," Saint now. And now it has happened. Pope Francis, appearing today with Pope Emeritus Benedict, announced that John Paul will become a saint, perhaps before the year is out. Two miracles are attributed to John Paul: the healing of a brain aneurysm in a Costa Rican woman, which took place on the day of John Paul's beatification, and the miraculous cure of a French nun afflicted with Parkinson's disease. With today's announcement came news that another pope would be made saint as well, John the 23rd, who presided over the Second Vatican Council.
Conservatives love John Paul II. Liberals love Pope John the 23rd. And what Pope Francis is saying is, hey, let's honor and revere both of these men.
A chance to unite the Catholic Church, shaken during John Paul's reign and ever since by sex abuse and corruption scandals. Today at St. Patrick's Cathedral, John Paul's impending canonization was welcome news.
If there's anybody that kind of brought faith to the community and brought people together, it was Pope John Paul II.
It's exciting to have a saint that we knew, that we lived through.
The People's Pope, now soon to become the People's Saint. Michelle Franzen, NBC News, New York.
Job growth in the United States was stronger than expected last month, cementing expectations for the U.S. Federal Reserve to start winding down its massive stimulus program as early as September. Employers added 195,000 new jobs to their payrolls last month, as the country's unemployment stayed unchanged at 7.6%.
I think today's report shows that the recovery is gaining traction. We added in the last 6 months 1.2 million jobs. Over the last 40 months, we've added over 7 million private sector jobs. So that's progress. But we're not going to be satisfied until every American who wants to find a job can find a job that leads to a decent standard of living. And I think as long as Congress doesn't get in the way of the progress that we've been making, I think we could see this recovery continue and gain strength.
We got pretty steady job gains, a little bit better than expected. The unemployment rate held steady, but that's because people are coming back into the labor force. So I think it's enough for what they want to see to start scaling back the bond purchases.
So, Tony, holding your breath for tomorrow then?
That's right. We've got the final that I think a lot of tennis fans want. It'll be Andy Murray against Novak Djokovic in tomorrow's men's final at Wimbledon. Djokovic beat Juan Martín del Potro in an epic 5-setter to book his place in the championship match. And Jameson Wong has all the highlights.
The lanky Argentine saved 2 match points in the 4th set on the way to winning it in a tie-break and forcing a 5th. But the 2011 champion broke Del Potro's serve at 4-3 in the deciding set and went on to victory. The scores in the nearly 5-hour match were 7-5, 4-6, 7-6, 6-7, and 6-3.
I have the experience of playing long matches, and I know that I have been pushed to the limit today, as my opponent was also, and it was one of the most thrilling matches to be, that I have ever played, especially here in Wimbledon. And it was a very high-quality tennis from the first to the last point.
I won the 4th set, saving match points. I had another break point in the 2-all in the 5th, and he served really well. And in the end, I think he played unbelievable.
Meanwhile, number 2 seed Andy Murray came back from losing the first set against Poland's Jerzy Janowicz to win in 4, 6-7, 6-4, 6-4, and 6-3. Murray and Djokovic will meet in a Grand Slam final for the 3rd time over the past 10 months. They split the last 2, with Murray taking a 5-setter at the U.S. Open last year and Djokovic winning in 4 sets in Australia earlier this season. Jameson Wong, TVB News.
Some basketball news now, and NBA center Dwight Howard is joining the Houston Rockets. 5 teams were in the running for the free agent, including the Los Angeles Lakers. Howard played for Los Angeles last season and averaged 17 points and 12 rebounds a game. In Houston, he'll team up with offensive stars James Harden and Jeremy Lin. On to football, and David Moyes made his first public appearance since being appointed Manchester United manager. Moyes made clear striker Wayne Rooney is not leaving Old Trafford.
I've had a chance to speak to Wayne. You know, I'm sure it's a question on your lips, and you probably couldn't wait to get it out. No. But the fact of the matter is, no, Wayne's not for sale. He's a Manchester United player. Will remain a Manchester United player.
And that's the news for tonight.
Thanks for watching. Good night.
Everyone, it was mainly cloudy with showers and isolated thunderstorms today. There were some sunny intervals during the day. At 5 p.m., an active southerly air stream was bringing showers to the coast of Guangdong and the northern part of the South China Sea. Today's temperatures ranged from 27.3 to 30.4 degrees, and the current temperature is 28.6 degrees Celsius. 4.6 millimeters of rain has been recorded since midnight. So, Freddie, how's the weather tomorrow?
Oh.
Mainly cloudy with showers and isolated thunderstorms during the day tomorrow. Temperatures will range from 27 to 30 degrees. Tomorrow's API is forecast at 10 to 70 and the pollution level will range from low to high. The maximum UV index forecast for tomorrow will be about 3. Now, here's the latest global weather update. Cloudy in Shanghai and Xiamen. Showers in Macau, cloudy in Chengdu. Cloudy in Beijing, Seoul, and Tokyo. Rain in Ho Chi Minh City and Manila. Showers in Kuala Lumpur and Singapore. Rain in Karachi and Mumbai. Sunny in Cairo, sunny intervals in Nairobi. Sunny in Brisbane and Sydney. Cloudy in Toronto and New York. Sunny intervals in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Sunny in London, Paris, Amsterdam and Zurich. And that's the weather. Have a great evening.